Before Columbus ever set foot on distant shores, mighty nations thrived in the heart of the Americas, building cities, raising sacred fires, and weaving a world of power and spirit that would soon stand at the edge of an irreversible tide. The great river stretched endlessly, carrying with it songs of the earth and whispers of the sky. Along its banks rose the proud mounds of Cahokia, sacred centers of life and memory, where people worked the fertile soil and gathered in the shade of towering wood palisades. Beyond the city, the forests were alive with deer, and the prairies echoed with the thunder of bison. To the west, Pueblo stood firm in the desert, and to the north, woodland tribes hunted and fished in harmony with rivers and lakes. In this wide land lived Waya, a young visionary who often stood on the highest mound to let the wind wash over his face. He dreamed not only of the world as it was, but of the unseen threads that tied people together across the four directions. The elders trained him to listen closely to voices of ancestors, the cries of hawks, the crackle of the sacred fire. In his heart, he carried a restless curiosity, as if he knew change would one day sweep across the land. The sacred fire burned bright that summer, its flames leaping like spirits into the darkening sky. Tribes from far valleys and rivers gathered at Cahokia, bringing songs, woven baskets, carved stones, and stories older than memory. In the great plaza, dancers circled to the beat of drums, while smoke curled upward, carrying prayers to the heavens. Ahiv, the shaman, sprinkled herbs into the fire, chanting words that spoke of balance and harmony. Nokomis, the wise elder woman, guided the young with a firm yet gentle hand, reminding them that strength was nothing without wisdom. Takota, a warrior with a scar across his cheek, stood vigilant at the edge of the gathering, eyes scanning for signs of unrest. Yet beneath the joy of celebration, unease lingered. In the flames, Ahiv saw shadows moving against the firelight, shapes of storms and broken ties. He warned the council that balance was fragile, and the people must guard against pride and betrayal. Waya felt his chest tighten, as if the fire itself had whispered to him alone, a warning of days when harmony would be tested. Not long after, traders arrived from the coast, their canoes heavy with shells that gleamed like moonlight. Around the fires, they told stories of vast waters where the earth ended and floating houses drifted across the horizon. Some laughed, calling them tales to amuse the young, but others sat silent, troubled by the thought of strangers moving upon waves. At the council, leaders argued, were these stories omens, or mere tricks of the tongue? Waya listened closely, torn between fear and fascination. In his dreams, he saw rivers flowing into endless seas, and beyond them, shapes too large, too foreign to name. That night, as wind rustled the grass on the mounds, he felt a shadow cross the land. Something stirred in the distance, unseen yet undeniable, and though the people of Cahokia still celebrated under the stars, the world they knew had already begun to shift. Trade paths stretched like veins across the continent, carrying shells from the warm Gulf, obsidian shards from the jagged mountains of the west, and copper gleaming like fire from the northern lakes. Canoes glided silently over rivers, laden with goods and stories. In Cahokia, Waya followed his elders into council gatherings, where chiefs and emissaries debated alliances and rivalries. He watched how words carried as much weight as weapons, how a gift of feathers or maize could secure peace as surely as a spear might start war. Yet even in these councils, he saw how greed could twist intentions. Some leaders spoke not for the people, but for their own pride. He began to understand that unity was fragile, held together by promises as delicate as strands of grass in the wind. Takota sharpened his spear under the rising sun, preparing for battle. Along the edges of Cahokia's influence, rival tribes pressed into hunting grounds, claiming rights to rivers and plains. At first, the disputes were settled with offerings of food or crafted goods. But soon, raiding parties struck under cover of night. Villages smoldered, and cries of vengeance echoed. Takota swore an oath before the sacred mound, vowing to defend his people at any cost. Yet Nokomis counseled patience, urging the leaders to seek peace rather than bloodshed. Waya stood between them, feeling the pull of both paths, warrior's honor or the healer's wisdom. But the drums of war grew louder, and soon the young men painted their faces for battle, while the elders prayed for restraint. Far to the west, Waya journeyed with traders to the Pueblos carved from stone and clay. There he saw fields of maize grown from desert dust, irrigated by clever channels that caught the scarce rain. Shamans taught him how to listen to the heartbeat of the earth, to sense when the land was weary and when it would give abundance. They spoke of cycles, of civilizations rising like the sun and falling like the moon, and warned him that even great cities could crumble into sand. One night, beneath a sky crowded with stars, Waya entered a vision. He saw rivers of fire sweeping through villages, saw temples collapse, and heard the cries of unborn generations. He awoke trembling, his face wet with tears. From that night forward, the truth of impermanence lived within him. When he returned to Cahokia, the city prepared for a great union. 2 powerful clans joined through marriage, sealing alliances with feasts and dances. The plaza swelled with celebration. Drums pounded, children ran laughing, and gifts of turquoise and furs exchanged hands. Yet even in joy, suspicion lingered in quiet glances and whispered words. Not all trusted the bond. Some feared it would tilt the balance of power. Takota, bound by loyalty to his clan, found himself torn between defending peace and answering the call of warriors who whispered of betrayal. Waya sensed the tension like thunderclouds hidden beyond the horizon. In the midst of music and laughter, seeds of discord took root, waiting for the moment to break open. The night came heavy with silence before the betrayal broke it apart. Fires flickered low as an allied tribe, sworn to brotherhood, crept upon Cahokia with torches and blades. Takota was first to meet them, his war cry cutting through the darkness as he raised his spear. The clash of stone and bone echoed across the mounds, and in the chaos he saw his brother fall, struck down by those once called kin. Blood stained the earth, mingling with the sacred soil of their ancestors. When the fighting ended, corpses lay among shattered dwellings, and the trust of generations lay broken. Waya stood before the traitors in the council's aftermath, his voice shaking with fury as he accused them of letting greed consume their honor. Yet he saw in their eyes only fear and hunger for power, and he understood that corruption had wormed its way deep into the hearts of men. The betrayal did not end with broken trust. One moon later, flames engulfed Cahokia in a devastating night of fire. Torches lit the sky as attackers stormed the palisades, and the sacred mounds themselves seemed to weep ash. The great plaza filled with screams, smoke choking the air as families fled into the dark. Temples that had stood for centuries collapsed in roaring infernos. Waya ran through the chaos, guiding children and elders away, his heart splintering as he watched the sacred fire consumed by the very element it once embodied. Takota fought until his body could no longer carry him, bloodied but unbroken, defending the last mound until dawn revealed a city of ruins. In the silence after the destruction, people asked if the gods had turned their backs, punishing them for pride and division. The survivors wandered the ashes, clutching fragments of broken pottery and broken hope. Amidst the ruins, Waya lay wounded, drifting between pain and vision. In his fevered dream, the horizon opened into an endless sea. From its depths rose wooden giants, sails billowing like wings, carrying figures with pale faces and eyes that gleamed with unfamiliar fire. He could not tell if they were spirits of salvation or shadows of doom. The vision shook him, more powerful than any dream before. When he awoke, weak but alive, he warned the people that a storm far greater than fire and betrayal loomed beyond the waters. His voice carried the weight of prophecy. Only unity could shield them from what was coming, though even he did not know what form it would take. In the shadow of smoldering mounds, leaders gathered for the last council. The air was heavy with grief, yet sharper still was the bitterness of accusation. Some demanded endless war, calling for vengeance against all who had betrayed them. Others spoke of retreat, to vanish into forests and mountains, where enemies would never find them. The council nearly broke apart in anger, voices rising like clashing thunder. But Nokomis, her hair silver as moonlight, stood and silenced them. Her words flowed steady as the river. Survival would not be found in conquest, nor in hiding, but in weaving bonds stronger than any spear. She urged them to seek kinship with distant tribes, to spread wisdom and trade, rather than fire and vengeance. In the end, her voice calmed the storm, and the council resolved to send envoys across the land. Their people, scarred yet unbroken, would rise again through alliance. Waya, now a young leader tempered by fire and vision, stepped forward to bear that burden, his heart echoing with the warning of unseen sails on the horizon. From the ashes of their sacred city, the survivors began to build again. The great mounds that once touched the sky were gone, but smaller shrines rose, each stone and log placed with reverence. The sacred fire was rekindled in a modest hearth, its smoke curling upward, as if to remind them that even the smallest flame could hold the strength of the sun. The people gathered in song, not of triumph, but of resilience, voices weaving together like threads in a new tapestry. Children ran through the fields once blackened by ash, their laughter carrying a promise that life endured. Dakota, who had spent years with blood on his hands, chose at last to lay down his spear. He guided the young in hunting and taught them discipline without cruelty, strength without hatred. In his heart, he found peace in nurturing rather than destroying. Waya, though still young, took his place among the council. The elders looked to him with cautious hope, for his visions spoke of dangers yet unseen, but also of the strength that unity could bring. In rebuilding, the people learned that greatness was not measured in the size of temples, but in the endurance of spirit. Seasons turned, and the scars of war softened beneath new harvests. The sacred fire burned steady, its glow reflected in the eyes of a people who had endured the storm. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Waya climbed the highest bluff overlooking the river. The wind pressed against him, carrying the scent of distant waters. He gazed toward the horizon, where sky met sea in an endless embrace. In his heart, he heard again the echoes of his vision, the creak of wooden giants, the ripple of sails billowing like clouds, the distant hum of voices not of this land. He stood long into the twilight, torn between dread and curiosity, knowing the world his people had rebuilt stood on the edge of change. Behind him, the fires of his people glowed warm and steady, but before him, the horizon whispered of strangers who would one day arrive. The land was alive, the nations strong, yet beneath the stars lingered a silence that spoke of tides soon to come. And so the story closed, not in defeat, nor in triumph, but in the quiet breath before history shifted forever.